My mother had a way of telling stories that made them feel like scripture. She would sit on the edge of my bed, the bedroom light casting long shadows across her face, and she would paint pictures with her words that I could still see years later. The ocean, the storm, the sacrifice. My father died at sea. That was the first truth I ever learned, long before I understood what death actually meant. He was a hero, she told me. A sailor who loved the water more than land, who felt the pull of the tide in his bones the way other men felt the pull of home. When the storm came, a furious, unforgiving tempest that swallowed ships whole, he didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood on that deck and made sure every single man under his command got to the lifeboats before he did. And then the wave took him. I grew up worshipping a ghost. His photograph hung in our hallway, a handsome man in a Navy uniform, smiling at something just outside the frame. I would stop and stare at it every morning before school, trying to memorize features I'd never seen move, never seen laugh, never seen cry. He was frozen in time, forever 29, forever brave, forever gone. My mother never remarried. She worked double shifts at the diner, came home with tired eyes and sore feet, and still found the energy to help me with homework. She wore a thin silver chain around her neck with a wedding ring threaded through it, and sometimes I'd catch her touching it while she stared out the window at nothing. "Don't you ever get lonely?" I asked her once, when I was old enough to understand the weight of the question. She smiled that smile she had, the one that carried decades in its corners. I had the greatest love, Elia. Some people never get that. I was lucky enough to have it, even if I couldn't keep it. That was my mother. She turned loss into gratitude. She turned tragedy into poetry. She took the ugliest thing that ever happened to us and polished it until it shone bright enough to live by. I believed her. I believed all of it. For 28 years, I believed. Let me tell you about my life now. It's small, but it's mine. I work at an independent bookstore in the city, the kind that smells like old paper and vanilla candles, where the floors creak in familiar places and the owner lets me take home any damaged books for free. I live in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, which means I wake up every morning to the smell of bread and the sound of the ocean 2 blocks away. The ocean. Always the ocean. I tell myself I live near it because I love the fog in the morning and the way the light hits the water at sunset. But maybe it's something else. Maybe I've been trying to feel close to him my whole life, standing at the edge of the thing that took him, daring it to explain itself. And then there's Leo. Leo found me 6 months ago, on a Tuesday that started like any other. He walked into the bookstore looking for a specific edition of a poetry collection I'd never heard of, and when I told him we didn't have it, he asked me what I'd recommend instead. We talked for an hour. By the time he left, he had 3 books I'd pressed into his hands, and I had his number written on a receipt in my pocket. Leo is not what you'd expect. He works at the docks, loading and unloading cargo ships, which means he comes home with salt in his hair and calluses on his hands and a tan that never quite fades. He's solid in a way that has nothing to do with muscle. He's the kind of man who remembers your coffee order, who notices when you're tired before you do, who holds doors open for strangers without thinking about it. He's also poor. Not struggling, exactly, but careful. He counts tips at the end of each shift and budgets for groceries and talks about someday like it's a destination he's still saving up for. I love that about him. I love that he's real, that he's grounded, that he's nothing like the polished, empty men I dated in my 20s who talked about stocks and vacations and never asked me a single question about myself. We fit. We fit in that easy way that makes you believe in luck, or fate, or whatever you want to call the force that brings 2 people together at exactly the right moment. I feel like I've known you forever, he told me one night, lying in my bed with the windows open so we could hear the waves. Maybe you have, I said. Maybe in another life. He laughed and pulled me closer. This life is enough for me. I thought it was enough for me too. I didn't know that the tide was already turning. I didn't know that something was coming that would pull us both under. It started small. A promotion at the docks, Leo told me, his voice bright with excitement. One of the supervisors had noticed his work ethic, his reliability. He was being moved to a different part of the operation, handling logistics for a major shipping company. That's amazing, I said, and I meant it. Which company? Marcus Shipping, he said, and the name meant nothing to me then. Just another corporation, another logo on another container ship. They're huge. Like, globally huge. I'll be working directly with their port coordinator. I kissed him and told him I was proud of him. I made him dinner to celebrate. We drank cheap wine and talked about the future, about maybe finding a better apartment, about maybe someday making things permanent. I had no idea that the name Marcus Shipping would soon become the center of my world. I had no idea that the man behind that name had been watching from the shadows for longer than I could imagine. I had no idea that my father's ghost was about to step out of the photograph and into my life. The first time I saw Marcus, I felt something I couldn't name. It was a few weeks after Leo's promotion. He'd been invited to some corporate function, a reception for dock workers and management, and he'd asked me to come as his date. I put on the only nice dress I owned, a navy blue thing I'd bought at a thrift store years ago, and we took the bus to a hotel downtown that I'd only ever walked past. The ballroom was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters circulating with trays of food I couldn't pronounce. Everyone seemed to know everyone. Everyone seemed to belong. I clutched Leo's arm and tried to remember how to exist in a room full of people who had more money in their shoes than I made in a month. And then I saw him. He was across the room, surrounded by people, the center of every orbit. Older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that looked carved from something harder than flesh. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than my car. He moved like someone who had never once doubted his place in the world. Marcus. Even without an introduction, I knew. There was something about him that commanded attention, that demanded respect, that made everyone around him lean in slightly, like flowers turning toward the sun. He was listening to someone speak, nodding gravely, and then his eyes lifted and found mine across the crowded room. The distance between us was 50 feet, maybe more. But in that moment, it felt like he was standing right in front of me. Like he could see through me. Like he was looking for something he'd lost a long time ago. I looked away first. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. I told myself it was just nerves, just the overwhelm of being somewhere so far outside my normal life. I told myself I was being ridiculous. But later that night, after Leo and I had taken the bus home, after I'd hung up my navy dress and washed the expensive champagne off my face, I lay awake in bed and thought about that moment. The way his eyes had held mine. The way something in my chest had pulled, like a thread being tugged from far away. I didn't sleep well that night. I didn't know that the thread would only pull tighter. I didn't know that the man across the room knew more about me than I knew about myself. I didn't know that my mother's greatest secret was already unwinding, thread by thread, and that soon there would be nothing left of the story she'd spent my whole life building. The hero was about to fall, and I would be the one left standing in the wreckage. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a presence in our lives without ever actually being present. Leo's phone buzzed at odd hours. Emails from assistants. Calls from numbers with area codes I didn't recognize. He started coming home later, exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes, but there was something else there too. A spark. A sense of purpose I hadn't seen before. They're restructuring the entire port operation, he told me one night, collapsing onto my couch. Marcus is personally overseeing it. Can you believe that? The man himself. He's been at the docks every day this week, walking the piers, talking to workers. He remembers names. Elia. He asked about my family. My family. I smiled and rubbed his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. That's great, baby. He sounds invested. Invested. Leo laughed, shaking his head. That's one word for it. The guys are calling him the captain. Not to his face, obviously. But there's something about him. When he walks onto the pier, everyone stands a little straighter. Even the cranes seem to work faster. I should have been happy for him. I was happy for him. But there was a small, selfish part of me that missed the way things used to be. Missed the lazy Sunday mornings and the unplanned dinners and the feeling that we were building something simple together. Now Leo's world was expanding, and I was standing at the edge of it, watching. Then the invitation started. A charity gala. A private dinner. A weekend trip to look at a new shipping terminal 3 states away. Each time, Leo asked me to come. Each time, I found a reason to say no. Work. Exhaustion. The vague, unshakable feeling that I didn't belong in those rooms with those people. You'd love it, Leo said, his disappointment barely hidden. Everyone asks about you. Marcus asks about you. That stopped me. Marcus. Why? Leo shrugged. I talk about you. He's just being polite. But I remembered that moment across the ballroom. The way his eyes had locked onto mine. There was nothing polite about it. I met him for the second time on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Leo had forgotten his lunch. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, a brown bag with a sandwich I'd made him that morning, and he texted me in a panic. He was in a meeting, couldn't leave. Could I possibly bring it to the docks? The docks were not my territory. They were loud and industrial, all metal and machinery and men shouting over the groan of engines. I found the right building eventually, a massive warehouse near the water, and stepped inside. The meeting was already over. Leo was standing near a bank of windows, talking to someone I couldn't see. His back was to me, but his posture was different than usual. Attentive. Almost reverent. I walked closer, the brown bag crinkling in my hand, and then the other man stepped into view. Marcus. He was even more imposing up close. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of tan that came from decades on the water rather than vacations. His suit was immaculate, but his hands were rough, scarred, the hands of someone who had actually worked. When he saw me, he stopped mid-sentence. Ilya, Leo said, turning. You're a lifesaver. He took the bag, kissed my cheek, but his attention was already shifting. Marcus, this is my girlfriend I've told you about. Ilya. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Too long. The kind of look that would have been inappropriate if it hadn't felt like something else entirely. Recognition, maybe. Or confirmation. Ilya, he said, and his voice was exactly what I expected. Deep. Commanding. The voice of someone used to being obeyed. Leo speaks of you constantly. I feel I already know you. Nice to meet you officially, I said, and my voice sounded small in the vast space. He smiled, and it transformed his face. Made him almost warm. I understand your mother raised you alone. That must have taken tremendous strength. The words landed strangely. Not threatening, exactly, but specific. Too specific for small talk. Yes, I said. She's remarkable. She must be. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. To raise a daughter like you. Leo is a lucky man. Leo grinned, oblivious to the undercurrent I couldn't quite name. Don't I know it? A phone buzzed. Marcus glanced down, then back at us. I have to take this. But Ilya, he paused, and something flickered in his eyes. I hope we'll see more of you. Leo is family now. That makes you family too. He walked away before I could respond, his voice already shifting into business mode as he answered the call. I stood there, heart beating strangely, watching him disappear into the maze of containers. See? Leo said, unwrapping his sandwich. I told you he was great. Yeah, I said quietly. Great. After that, Marcus was everywhere. Not literally, but in the spaces between things. Leo mentioned him constantly. His advice. His mentorship. The way he'd taken Leo under his wing and was teaching him the business from the inside out. He never had kids, Leo told me one night, his voice soft with something like wonder. His wife died years ago. Cancer. He's been alone ever since. I think I remind him of someone. Of who he used to be, maybe. I wanted to ask questions. Too many questions. Why Leo? What did Marcus really want? But Leo looked so happy, so hopeful, and I didn't want to be the one who poisoned it. Instead, I asked my mother. We were on our weekly phone call, the kind where she told me about her garden and I told her about the bookstore, and neither of us said the things that really mattered. But this time, I pushed. Have you ever heard of Marcus Shipping? Silence. long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Mom. Yes. Her voice was different. Careful. Why? Leo's working for them. The owner, Marcus, has been mentoring him. It's a big deal. More silence. When she spoke again, she sounded tired. Be careful, Elia. Those shipping companies, they're not always what they seem. What do you mean? I mean, she stopped. Sighed. I mean nothing. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure he's a perfectly respectable businessman. Just be careful. The call ended soon after. I stared at my phone for a long time, something cold settling in my stomach. She knew something. She wasn't telling me. For the first time in my life, I wondered what else she'd kept hidden. The adoption happened in December. Leo called me from his car, his voice shaking. Not with sadness. With something bigger. Something that didn't have a name. He asked me, Leo said. Marcus. He asked if he could adopt me. Legally. I'm 32 years old, Elia, and he asked if he could be my father. I sat down on my kitchen floor. The tiles were cold through my jeans. What did you say? I said yes. A breath. God, I said yes. Is that crazy? We've known each other 4 months. But he's everything I never had, Elia. My real dad left when I was 3. I don't even remember his face. And Marcus looks at me like I matter. Like I'm his. I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to celebrate. But all I could feel was the cold spreading through my chest, the sense that something was very, very wrong. That's amazing, Leo, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I'm happy for you. You'll come to the ceremony? It's small. Just lawyers and signatures. But he wants you there. He specifically asked for you. Of course he did. Of course, I said. I'll be there. The ceremony was exactly as Leo described. Small. Legal. A judge, 2 lawyers, Marcus and Leo signing documents in a conference room that smelled like coffee and expensive cologne. I stood in the corner and watched. Marcus placed his hand on Leo's shoulder afterward, and for a moment, his mask slipped. There was genuine emotion there. Affection, even. He looked at Leo like a father looks at a son. Then his eyes found mine across the room, and the mask was back. But not before I saw something else. Something that made my blood run cold. Possessiveness. Not of Leo. Of me. He smiled, and I smiled back, and we all went to lunch at a restaurant where the menus didn't have prices. Leo talked about the future. Marcus made plans. I pushed food around my plate and counted the minutes until I could leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand the dread coiling in my chest. It didn't make sense. Marcus had given Leo everything. A future. A family. A name. So why did it feel like we'd just signed something none of us understood? Why did it feel like my father's ghost was reaching out from the deep water, trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear? I got up and walked to the window. The ocean was out there somewhere, dark and endless, hiding all its secrets beneath the surface. Just like my mother. Just like Marcus. Just like the truth I was about to uncover. The gala was held at Marcus's estate. I'd seen pictures, of course, the kind that appeared in magazines and architectural digests, but nothing prepared me for the reality of it. The house sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all glass and steel and angles that caught the dying light and threw it back at the sky. The driveway alone was longer than my entire street. Leo drove us in a car that Marcus had loaned him. A sleek black thing that hummed with quiet power, the kind of vehicle that made valets straighten their spines. Leo handled it easily, confidently, as if he'd been born to it. Nervous? He asked, reaching for my hand. No, I lied. He squeezed my fingers. You look beautiful. Everyone's going to love you. I was wearing a dress I couldn't afford, deep green silk that Marcus's assistant had arranged. A gift, the woman had said when she delivered it, her smile perfectly calibrated. Mr. Marcus insists. I'd wanted to refuse. But Leo had looked so happy, so proud, and I didn't have the heart to make this about my discomfort. So I wore the dress. I let them paint my face and arrange my hair. I became the woman they wanted me to be. The real me was somewhere underneath, screaming to get out. The party was overwhelming in every possible way. Hundreds of people filled the main hall, a soaring space with windows that overlooked the black water. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished floors. A string quartet played something classical and melancholy in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd like ghosts, offering champagne on silver trays. I recognized faces from magazines. Politicians, actors, tech billionaires. They mingled with shipping executives and foreign dignitaries, all of them glowing with the particular confidence of people who had never once worried about money. Leo was in his element. He shook hands, made jokes, remembered names. Marcus had been preparing him for this, teaching him the dance of the elite. I watched my boyfriend transform into someone I barely recognized, and I wasn't sure whether to be proud or terrified. And then there was Marcus. He moved through the crowd like a ship cutting through water, parting waves of people who leaned in to touch his arm, to catch his eye, to bask in his gravity for just a moment. He wore black tie like he'd been born in it. He smiled and nodded and made everyone feel seen. But his eyes kept finding me. Across the room. Through the crowd. In the reflection of windows. Wherever I stood, whatever I did, I felt his attention like a physical weight. Not threatening. Just present. Watchful. As if I was the only thing in the room that actually mattered. I drank more champagne than I should have. Hours passed. The party swelled and peaked and began its slow decline into the early morning. People grew louder, looser, their laughter carrying further. I'd lost Leo to a conversation with some shipping magnates from Singapore, and I'd found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, grateful for the cool air against my flushed skin. Enjoying yourself. I turned. Marcus stood a few feet away, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. He offered me one. I shouldn't, I said. I've already had. Indulge me. There was no threat in the words. No demand. Just a simple request from a man who wasn't used to being refused. I took the glass. Thank you, I said. For everything. The dress. The invitation. Leo says you've changed his life. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human. Leo changed his own life. I just opened a door. He paused, looking out at the ocean. He reminds me of someone I used to know. Someone I lost. His father. No. The word was soft, almost sad. Someone else. A long time ago. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the waves break against the cliffs far below. The champagne was excellent, crisp and cold, and I hated how much I enjoyed it. Your mother, Marcus said suddenly. Is she well? The question caught me off guard. She's fine. Why? Curiosity. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were unreadable. She raised you alone, you said. That must have been difficult. She managed. I'm sure she did. A pause. What did she tell you about your father? The question landed like a stone in still water. Ripples spread outward, disturbing things I'd kept settled for years. She told me he was a sailor, I said carefully. That he died saving his crew in a storm. That he was a hero. Marcus nodded slowly. A hero. He tasted the word like it was unfamiliar. And you believed her? Of course I believed her. She's my mother. He looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Pity, almost. Or regret. Of course, he said quietly. Forgive me. I didn't mean to pry. He didn't mean it. I could feel it in my bones. He'd meant exactly to pry, to push, to see how I would react. But before I could ask what he really wanted, Leo appeared, flushed with champagne and success. There you are. He kissed my cheek, clapped Marcus on the shoulder. They're about to make the announcement. We should be inside. Marcus straightened, the mask sliding back into place. Of course. Ilya, thank you for the conversation. He walked away, and I watched him go, the unanswered questions burning in my throat. The announcement was simple. Marcus stood at a small podium, the room falling silent around him, and spoke about legacy, about family, about the future. Tonight, he said, I want to share something personal. Many of you know that I've spent my life building this company. What you may not know is that I've spent it alone. My wife passed many years ago. We had no children, and I've carried that emptiness with me longer than I care to admit. He paused, looking out at the crowd. His eyes found Leo, found me. But life has a way of surprising you. A few months ago, I met a young man, hardworking, honest, full of potential, and I saw something in him that I haven't seen in years. I saw hope. Leo's hand found mine, squeezed tight. I've formally adopted Leo as my son. He is my heir, my family, my future. The room erupted in applause. People surged forward to congratulate them, to shake Leo's hand, to kiss Marcus's cheek. I was pushed to the edges, watching from outside as my boyfriend was swallowed by his new life. And then, through the crowd, Marcus's eyes found mine again. He raised his glass. A private toast. Just for me. I didn't raise mine back. I needed air. The terrace was empty now, everyone inside celebrating. I leaned against the railing and stared at the ocean, trying to breathe past the pressure in my chest. The wind was cold, cutting through my expensive dress, but I welcomed it. I needed to feel something real. You should be inside. I didn't turn. I knew the voice. I needed a minute. Marcus came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth despite the wind. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stood there, looking out at the water, and I hated how natural it felt. How easy. I knew your father, he said quietly. The words hit me like a wave. I turned to face him, my heart suddenly pounding. What did you say? Marcus didn't look at me, kept his eyes on the ocean. I knew him. Not well, but I knew him. How? He worked for me. A pause. He was on one of my ships. The world tilted. I grabbed the railing to steady myself. My father was a sailor on a merchant vessel. He wasn't. I stopped. Swallowed. He wasn't on a Marcus ship. Ilya. Now he looked at me, and his eyes were kind. Too kind. He was. 29 years ago. The SS Venture. A storm in the North Atlantic. No, that wasn't possible. My mother would have told me. She would have. She never mentioned it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Marcus nodded slowly. I wondered. When Leo first told me your name. When I saw your photograph. I wondered if you were the same Ilya. If she was the same woman. He paused. I never forgot your mother, Ilya. She was remarkable. You knew my mother. I knew both of them. Your father was a good man, a hard worker. And your mother, he stopped, something flickering across his face. Your mother was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The implication hung in the air between us, poisonous and impossible. What are you saying? Marcus turned away, back to the ocean. I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling you the truth. You deserve to know. Know what? My voice was rising now, cracking. Know that you knew them? Know that my mother lied to me my whole life? Know that my father died on your ship? The last word hung there. Died. Marcus flinched. Just barely, but I saw it. Yes, he said quietly. He died on my ship. And I've carried that with me every day since. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The party continued inside, laughter and music and celebration, and I was standing on the edge of it all, watching my entire life collapse. I need to go inside, I said. Ilya. I need to find Leo. I walked away, left him standing at the railing, staring at the ocean that had taken everything from me. But I didn't find Leo. I couldn't face him, not yet. Instead, I wandered through Marcus's house, past paintings worth more than my apartment, past rooms I'd never see again, until I found myself in a study. Dark wood, leather chairs, books that looked like they'd actually been read. And on the desk, a photograph. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was my mother. Decades younger, her face unlined, her smile bright. She was standing on a dock somewhere, the sun behind her, and next to her. Next to her was Marcus. Young and handsome, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something just outside the frame. There was no mistaking it. The way they leaned into each other. The way they looked at each other. This was not a picture of acquaintances. This was a picture of lovers. I stared at it for a long time, the photograph trembling in my hands. And somewhere in the house, the party went on without me, celebrating a family that was built on the wreckage of mine. I don't remember leaving the study. I don't remember finding Leo, or saying goodbye, or the long drive home in a car I didn't know how to drive. What I remember is the photograph, burned into my mind like a brand. My mother's face. Marcus's arm around her. The way they looked at each other like the world didn't exist outside their orbit. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., the tile cold against my skin, staring at my phone. Waiting for daylight. Waiting for answers. Waiting for my mother to answer the call I'd already made 7 times. She didn't pick up. Morning came eventually, grey and unforgiving through my small apartment windows. I hadn't slept. Hadn't moved from the floor. My body ached, and my mind raced in circles, and every time I closed my eyes I saw that photograph. At 8 a.m., I called her again. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Ilya, it's early, honey, is everything?" "No." My voice was raw, scrape hollow. "Everything is not okay. I need you to tell me the truth." Silence. The kind of silence that knows what's coming. I don't know what you don't. I stood up, pacing the small space of my kitchen. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I was at Marcus's house last night. I saw the photograph. You and him. On the dock. Your arm around each other. So tell me. Tell me the truth, or I swear to God I will hang up and never speak to you again. The longest silence of my life. And then my mother's voice, broken in a way I'd never heard before. "Come home." The bus ride took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the city give way to suburbs, then farmland, then the small coastal town where I'd grown up. 4 hours of staring out the window and seeing nothing but my mother's face superimposed over the passing landscape. 4 hours of trying to prepare myself for a truth I already knew was going to destroy me. She was waiting on the porch when I arrived. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The lines around her eyes seemed deeper, the grey in her hair more pronounced. She wore an old sweater, the one she'd had for as long as I could remember, and she clutched a mug of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her upright. We didn't speak. We didn't hug. I just walked up the steps and sat down next to her on the wooden swing that had been there my whole life. The ocean was visible from here. Just a sliver between the houses, but enough. Always enough. "I should have told you," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, steady, like she'd been rehearsing this moment for decades. "I should have told you 1,000 times. But every time I tried, I couldn't. The words wouldn't come." "Start at the beginning," I said. "And don't leave anything out." She took a breath. Held it. Let it go. I met Marcus first. The words landed like stones. It was 30 years ago. I was 22, working at a restaurant near the docks. He used to come in for lunch when his ships were in port. He was handsome, charismatic, older than me, but not too old. And he had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the world. I closed my eyes. Didn't want to picture it. Couldn't stop. We fell in love. Or I thought we did. He told me he loved me. He told me he was going to leave his wife. My eyes snapped open. His wife. He was married, Ilya. I didn't know at first. By the time I found out, I was already in too deep. She shook her head, staring at nothing. I was stupid. young and stupid and so desperate to be loved that I convinced myself it didn't matter. He said he'd leave her. He said he just needed time. The swing creaked as we moved, back and forth, back and forth. Then I got pregnant. My breath caught. With me. With you. The world stopped. The swing. The ocean. The birds in the distance. Everything stopped. I told Marcus. I thought it would be the thing that finally made him choose me. That he'd see his child and he'd leave his wife and we'd be a family. Her voice cracked. He told me to get rid of it. I couldn't breathe. He gave me money. Told me to find a doctor, take care of it, and he'd make sure I was looked after. He didn't want the scandal. He didn't want his wife to find out. He didn't want. She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. But you didn't. No. Tears were streaming down her face now. I couldn't. You were mine. You were all I had. So I left. I quit the restaurant, moved back home, and I never looked back. Then who? I stopped. Swallowed. Who was my father? The man in the photograph? The hero who died at sea? My mother's face crumpled. His name was Thomas. Thomas Elia. I gave you his last name as your middle name because he deserved to be remembered. Who was he? He was a sailor on Marcus's ship. A good man. A kind man. I met him after I left the city, when I was already pregnant with you. He knew. I told him everything, and he didn't care. He loved me anyway. He loved you before you were even born. I thought of the photograph in our hallway. The handsome man in uniform. The hero I'd worshipped my whole life. He wanted to marry me. He wanted to raise you as his own. We were going to wait until his next shore leave, make it official, start our lives together. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And then the storm came. The Venture. She nodded. He was on the Venture. Marcus's ship. They were crossing the North Atlantic when the storm hit. Thomas, he was a good sailor. He'd survived worse. But that night, something went wrong. Something that had nothing to do with the weather. I leaned forward. What do you mean? My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Rage. Old and deep and carefully buried. There was an investigation. Quiet, because Marcus had money and power and could make things disappear. But I found out the truth. The ship didn't sink because of the storm. It sank because Marcus panicked. Because he gave the wrong order. Because he took the only lifeboat that could have saved everyone and left his crew to die. The words hung in the air between us. He survived, I whispered. He survived. Her voice was bitter, poisonous. He got in that boat with a few senior officers and rowed away while the rest of them drowned. Including Thomas. Including the man who was going to be your father. I thought of the photograph on Marcus's desk. My mother, young and laughing, her arm around the man who would destroy her life. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to carry that. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it. I wanted you to have something good. Something to believe in. Thomas was good. He was everything Marcus wasn't. So I gave him to you. I gave you his heroism, his kindness, his love. I gave you the father you deserved. But he wasn't my real father. He was more your father than Marcus could ever be. She squeezed my hand hard. Thomas chose you. He chose us. He was going to spend his life loving you, and he died because of the cowardice of the man who should have saved him. I sat there, the swing moving gently, the ocean whispering in the distance. Everything I'd believed was a lie. Every story, every memory, every piece of my identity built on a foundation that didn't exist. My father wasn't a hero who died saving his crew. He was a good man who died because a coward saved himself. And that coward had just adopted the man I loved. I called Leo on the bus ride back to the city. He answered on the first ring, his voice bright with excitement. Elia, where did you go last night? I've been trying to reach you. Leo, listen to me. My voice was flat, empty, I need to tell you something. Something about Marcus. Something you're not going to want to hear. The silence on the other end was different from my mother's. Cautious. Guarded. What kind of something? The kind that changes everything. Another pause. Ilya, I don't know what you think you found out, but Marcus has been nothing but good to me. To us. Whatever it is, it can wait. We are having dinner tonight at his house. Just the three of us. He wants to talk about the future. The future. I almost laughed. Almost. Leo, there is no future. Not with him. Not after what I know. Ilya. Just meet me. Before dinner. There's a coffee shop near your apartment. 4 o'clock. If you don't come, I'll tell you anyway. But you deserve to hear it from me. I hung up before he could respond. The bus carried me back to the city, back to the life I'd built on a lie, back to the man I loved who was now the son of the man who destroyed my family. I didn't know if Leo would show up. I didn't know if what I had to say would matter. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. By the end of the night, someone's world was going to shatter. And I was done being the only one left in the dark. Leo was waiting when I arrived. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a laundromat and a bodega, the kind of place we used to go before everything changed. He sat at our usual table by the window, 2 cups already waiting. His leg bounced under the table. Nervous. He knew. I sat down without speaking. Ilya. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it. His fingers were warm, familiar, the same hands that had held mine 100 times. You're scaring me. What's going on? I looked at him. Really looked. At the worry in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he was already braced for bad news. He had no idea. No idea that the ground beneath him was about to crumble. Marcus knew my mother. Leo blinked. Okay. He knows a lot of people. He's been in business for decades. He knew her personally. I pulled my hand back. 30 years ago. Before I was born. They were involved. The words landed. I watched them hit, watched him process, watched the confusion shift into something else. Something wary. Involved how? They were lovers, Leo. He was married. She got pregnant. With me. The silence stretched between us. A truck rumbled past outside. Somewhere in the back, a dishwasher hummed. You're saying, Leo stopped. Started again. You're saying Marcus is your father? No. The word came out sharper than I intended. No. He's not. My mother left him when she found out he wouldn't leave his wife. She raised me alone. She met someone else, a good man who wanted to be my father, and he died on Marcus's ship. Leo's face went pale. What ship? The Venture. 29 years ago. A storm in the North Atlantic. Marcus took the only lifeboat and left his crew to drown, including the man who was going to marry my mother, including the man I thought was my father my whole life. I watched Leo's world collapse in real time, the hope draining from his eyes, the future he'd been building crumbling around him. No, he whispered. No, that can't be right. Marcus is. He's a good man. He's been nothing but. He's a liar. My voice was steady now. Certain. He's been lying to everyone for 30 years. He let my mother raise me alone, believing the man she loved died a hero, when really he died because Marcus was a coward. Leo shook his head, back and forth, back and forth. There has to be an explanation. There has to be. There isn't. I leaned forward, willing him to understand. I know you love him. I know he's given you everything you never had. But it's built on a lie, Leo. Everything he is, everything he has, it's built on the bodies of the men he left behind. Leo stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood up. I have to go. Leo. I have to go. I have to. I need to talk to him. He was already moving toward the door, his face pale, his hand shaking. I'll call you. He was gone before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, staring at the 2 cups of coffee growing cold on the table between us. I didn't hear from him that night, or the next morning, or the next. I called, texted, left messages that grew shorter and more desperate. Nothing. Just silence, heavy and complete, like he'd disappeared into the ocean itself. On the 3rd day, an envelope appeared under my door. Plain white. No return address. My name written in handwriting I knew. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Leo's handwriting, rushed and uneven, like he'd written it in the dark. Elia, I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what any of this means. I talked to Marcus. He told me everything. Not because he wanted to, but because I wouldn't let him lie to me anymore. He admitted it. The ship. The storm. The lifeboat. He said he's lived with the guilt every day since. He said he's tried to make up for it in 1,000 ways, through charities and scholarships and quietly taking care of families who never knew where the money came from. He said your mother was the only woman he ever really loved. That he's looked for her in every face he's met since. That when he saw me, when he heard your name, he thought it was some kind of sign. A chance at redemption. I don't know what to do with any of this. I don't know how to hold the man who gave me everything alongside the man who took everything from you. I'm not choosing him. I need you to know that. But I'm not sure I can choose you either. Not yet. Not while I'm still standing in the wreckage of both. Give me time. Please. I love you. I think that's the only thing I'm sure of. Leo. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it on my kitchen table. The ocean hummed in the distance, indifferent to my pain. The invitation arrived a week later. A private dinner. Marcus's estate. Leo and I would like to see you. Please come. Handwritten on thick cream paper, the kind that cost more than my weekly groceries. I almost threw it away. But something made me keep it. Something made me iron my dress and take the bus to the cliffside and walk up that long driveway one last time. They were waiting on the terrace. Marcus stood near the railing, older than I remembered, the weight of decades visible in the lines of his face. Leo stood beside him, his expression unreadable. Between them, a small table set for 3, candles flickering against the darkening sky. Elia. Marcus's voice was quiet, respectful. Thank you for coming. I didn't sit. Why am I here? Leo stepped forward. Because we both owe you the truth. All of it. I looked at him. At the man I loved, standing beside the man who destroyed my family. I already know the truth. You know the facts. Marcus's voice was careful, measured. You don't know the rest. You don't know that I've spent every day since that storm trying to be someone worthy of the lives I failed to save. You don't know that I've funded scholarships for every child of every crew member on that ship. You don't know that I've never stopped loving your mother, even though I had no right to. None of that brings him back. No. He met my eyes. Nothing will. I know that. I've always known that. But I thought. He stopped, his composure cracking for just a moment. I thought if I could do some good, if I could help someone like Leo, someone who reminded me of the son I never had, if I could just... If you could just what? Buy your way out of guilt. No. His voice was firm now. Certain. Not buy my way out. Earn my way through. There's a difference. I wanted to argue. Wanted to scream. But the words wouldn't come. Leo moved closer. Elia, I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to see him. Really see him. The way I have. I see him, I said quietly. I see a man who let my father die. He did. Marcus's voice was steady. I did. And I will carry that until the day I die. But I'm asking you, not for forgiveness, but for a chance. A chance to know you. A chance to be something other than the villain in your story. I looked at him. At the man who'd loved my mother. The man who'd destroyed her life. The man who'd saved himself and left everyone else to drown. And I thought about my mother, about the hero she'd built from a lie, about the love she'd given me, the life she'd made from the wreckage, about Thomas, the man who would have been my father, who died because he was too good to leave anyone behind. I don't know if I can do this, I said. Leo took my hand. Then don't decide tonight. Just stay. Have dinner with us. Let tomorrow worry about itself. I looked at the table. The candles. The ocean beyond, dark and endless, holding all its secrets. I thought about the photograph in my mother's house. The man in uniform, frozen in time, forever young, forever brave. The father I'd never had. And I thought about the man standing in front of me. Flawed. Guilty. Human. Asking for something I wasn't sure I could give. I sat down. Dinner was strange. Formal and intimate at once. 3 people circling each other like planets caught in the same impossible orbit. We talked about small things. The weather. The food. The way the light hit the water at sunset. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't talk about the future. We just existed, together, in the strange space between what had been and what might be. At the end of the night, Marcus walked me to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For coming. For staying. For giving me," he stopped, searching for words. "For giving me a moment I didn't deserve." I looked at him. Really looked. Past the money and the power and the guilt. Past the photograph and the storm and the lifeboat. I looked at the man beneath, the one who'd spent 30 years trying to outrun a moment of cowardice. "I don't forgive you," I said. "I don't know if I ever will." He nodded. "I know. But I'm willing to try. To understand. To see if there's something here worth knowing." I paused. "That's all I can offer." A long moment passed. Then Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "That's more than I deserve." I walked down the driveway without looking back. Leo caught up to me halfway, falling into step beside me. "What happens now?" he asked. I thought about my mother, alone in her small house by the ocean, carrying secrets for 30 years. I thought about Thomas, the man who would have been my father, whose goodness lived on in a story that wasn't quite true. I thought about Marcus, standing on his terrace, watching us go. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm done running from it." Leo took my hand. We walked together toward the road, toward the bus, toward whatever came next. The ocean whispered behind us, ancient and endless, holding all the truth we'd never know. Some stories don't end neatly. Some wounds don't fully heal. Some families are built on wreckage, and the best you can do is learn to live among the pieces. I'm still learning. My mother calls more often now. We are finding our way back to each other, slowly, carefully, like people learning to trust ground that once gave way beneath them. Leo is still Leo. Still kind, still solid, still the man I fell in love with. He's building something new with Marcus, something complicated and real, and I'm learning to be part of it. As for Marcus, I don't know yet. Some days I look at him and see the man who destroyed my family. Other days I see someone trying, failing, trying again. Maybe both are true. Maybe that's the point. The photograph of Thomas still hangs in my mother's hallway. I stop and look at it whenever I visit. He's still a hero to me, just a different kind than I imagined. Not the man who died saving his crew, but the man who loved a woman enough to raise another man's child. The man who chose us, knowing we came with secrets and scars. The man who would have been my father, if he'd lived. That's the truth I carry now. Not the lie my mother built to protect me. Not the guilt Marcus carries for what he did. Just this: love is complicated. People are broken. And the ocean keeps rolling, indifferent to our pain, carrying all our secrets to some distant shore. I stand at the edge sometimes, watching the waves, waiting to see what washes back.